Hey, good morning. Good morning,
Good
Rich.
morning.
It's March 22nd, 2024.
Yes.
That's 2024 still sounds a little weird to me. And it's
We're
old.
almost the first quarter into it too.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I know. So that's even weirder. But here we are, live on the Dev Talk
hmm
Show. And if you haven't seen us before, have co-host Rich Ross, and then uh, also hosting me.
oh, sorry.
Easy to point to me. This one I still did the thing where I was like, does it go across this way?
That
And
way.
it
Yeah, you're
does.
right. You're
So
right.
so if you joined us last time, we took a journey to begin what I could only call deconstructing Blazor authentication by starting a new project with no interactivity. Basically, I kind of thought that I was trying to start with the least featured project possible.
hmm
No interactivity, no authentication, and then what does it take to add it back in, or to add at least something back in that resembles understanding who is logged into the app, right?
Right.
And we learned some interesting things, which I think we'll go over. Um, and hopefully, if you watched, you enjoyed it. Now, this time, just to set the stage for people who are deciding if they want to watch the rest of the video, there's going to be a little bit of review. I think to basically say, hey, here's where clearly you have to get this far, otherwise it's going to crash and burn and tell you that you don't have authentication state provider set up correctly, and then try to push forward with both talking about how to do this server side and then maybe if we have time start getting to the end, one of the end goals here, which is have a login component instead of login pages,
Right.
and talk about the implications of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm checking my things here because there's. It's funny. It sounded like my mic was left on during the during the intro.
yeah,
Um,
I think
and I'm
so.
not
I
sure
think I
why
heard
because I
like
looked
I
over
might
and
have
it
heard
was.
like a can open or something. I'm not 100% sure. So,
Yeah. Very bizarre. No cans, unfortunately, just my coffee.
okay.
Uh,
Well, again, I just thought I heard like, and it's, who knows? It could be a pencil running across the desk, or
it's funny. We should do identify that sound because it
yeah,
could be very interesting what it actually is. So,
identify the hot mic sound. So,
hmm
anyways,
yeah, I will. I don't have. I don't have a typical tool or something like that this time around because we did 4 shows this week. This is show number
oh wow,
4. Yeah.
yeah, cool.
So it's been a busy week. But I will, since it was kind of light on the stream yesterday, I will kind of reuse my tip from yesterday. And that was uh, registration is open for Microsoft Build, which is our developer conference. So go register. It's free to register to see all of the digital content or the online content. If you have, um, if you're interested in going in person, there is an in-person component as well. Highly recommend getting out there if you've not been there before, because the interaction and the people you can get to talk to at a live conference still is makes it worth going. So, yeah, and most of the content winds up being streamed as well. So if you can't make it, can't travel, whatever the condition might be, there's certainly the capability to see a lot of that technical content and actually to be able to interact remotely as well. So that is, that's the site there. That's cool. 60 days, counting them down.
All right, in May. Look at that; it'll be here before we know it.
Yep. Yeah. And that is one of my favorite conferences, having been there a number of times prior to joining Microsoft. Um, it is a great environment and great place to be.
Yeah, maybe someday. Maybe someday. I was at PDC in 2000, the predecessor, I would say, to Build,
Yep.
So it's been a long time.
Yeah. Let's go
All
back that far.
right.
What was that? That was XP days, right?
It was the conference where they announced .NET to the world.
Ah, even okay.
Yeah.
That's an auspicious one.
It was yeah. In fact, it was on Channel 9 for a very long time. Again, I don't know the specifics, but it sounds like some of the general keynote-ish sessions may have been lost in some way. But so the way that they structured that one was there was this general session for everybody the first couple days, and it was when they just were really pouring it on about .NET and introducing their brand new language, and VB.NET is now a first-class citizen and all of that. And it was really a transformative time. So it was just dumb luck to go to that one, because it was not specifically like, oh, I got to go to this one because of this thing they're announcing. Last time we specifically created a Blazor web template app with .NET 8 and ASP.NET Core 8, and specifically chose no authentication and no interactivity. And then quickly discovered a couple things that was interesting. I think we discovered really fast that we could not use the authorize component. So, for example, there's some jury-rigged code here, right? That seems to be working. But the standard Blazor way of an authorized view, and then you put in here authorized, and you can, and I love how it's like filling it in, because this is pretty much what I'm looking for.
Right.
And that this method allows you to, in your Razor, had it in your Razor templates for a component, allows you to basically switch back and forth. And the moment we added this, or even just tried to use the authentication state provider, it would say, what authentication state provider? You don't have one of those. And sure enough, we did not. But then when you go look at templates with interactivity, you're not seeing that service getting added anywhere. And when we dove into this particular method, add cascading authentication state, that didn't work either. So what ended up happening is, as we've talked about on this show, if you, the way that you add Blazor server is you align a code here, and then you got to come down here and add interactive server mode. And that's basically the difference between it's one of the differences between a Blazor template that's purely server-side rendered and one that has Blazor server support. And then when we did that, it all started working, and that was mysterious.
A little bit.
So the reason I want to review this is because folks who are watching may not have known what shortcut keys I was using. This happened to be in Visual Studio IDE. You could do all of this from Visual Studio Code as well. But the way we figured out, basically the mystery was where's an authentication state? Where is it? Where's an authentication state provider being added if it's complaining? Like if I take this out, quick, now I got to put the semicolons back in. And I think take this out, and try to run, I believe we're going to kind of be back to where we were. I guess we're about to find out. This is going to open up in another window for me. Oh no, there it is right there. And here we go. Yeah. It says, look, I can't use authorized view. Can't do it. So let's see. Is that enough? Is that enough to bring that back? That would be cool, because then at least we would kind of know. Yeah, see, that's enough. That was enough. Just adding interactive server render mode. I could have also done interactive WebAssembly. At least
Right.
I believe so. So for folks who don't know, you might know if you watch the show and appreciate it, or even if you just know because you're a veteran Visual Studio developer, that if I right click here and pick, I could either say go to definition or go to implementation. Sometimes I will, and I use these shortcut keys. So Control F12 here is the trick. And then it's getting a little bit better with Zoom It.
There you go.
But we also have F12, and sometimes I'll just hit F12. Sometimes I know that it's gonna take me to an interface, and I go, no, let's go all the way to the concrete implementation. So if I hit Control F12 while I've clicked here, so the mouse is blinking, Control F12, and here we are. We have moved in to using the source server. We've jumped right into the code written by the team. So this isn't our code. And the only reason I wanted to say this is just to make it clearer if somebody was either watching the last show or maybe they've said, wow, how did he get to that code so quickly? It's really Control F12. And we are looking at the real add interactive server components extension method, which then says, okay, well, we're going to go to the services collection on Builder and add server-side Blazor, which I know I can navigate to, can't I? It's interesting that it's fighting me there. That doesn't make sense because I know that we went further. I know we went further and we found the authentication state provider getting created. So I find that interesting that it's kind of yelling at me here. Let's try that again. Go to definition. Okay. Add server-side Blazor. Go to definition. Oh, I don't know. That's kind of strange. But
that is weird.
Yeah. And last time when we were here, we got all the way down to, we actually saw the authentication state provider getting added and said like, oh, okay. Services. And see, this isn't doing much more. Return a new default server-side Blazor builder, which, okay. Makes me wonder, can I get here? No. Here, this is the implementation. And then interesting, it shows what it supports. And then, but yeah, it's funny because we did this last time. So
yeah, we did see it.
Yeah, I wonder, was it here? Was it this? Was it this thing? Maybe that's what it was.
Under the add cascading, yeah.
Yeah, so it was, you needed interactive server components, and then you needed add cascading authentication state, I think. So when I come here, I hit F12 just now.
Yeah.
The point here is, yeah, now we're seeing that it's saying, well, this is saying get a required service, but it's still not telling us where it's coming from. But it is, eventually we're seeing that it's like, okay, we're going to add a cascading value, an authentication state provider. Well, I take it. So what's happening here is we're adding a cascading value, and we get to add it by way of a Lambda. And so what the Lambda is doing is the Lambda is going out and saying, go get an authentication state provider and then return it. But the question was, it's like, okay, well, where's that coming from? And I think we figured out that, I'm not It's funny because I'm still seeing that this is going out and getting the required service,
Right.
but where it's actually coming from is a different story.
Right. It's nothing we've wired up inside of the program.cs.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like we got a touch further last time. So in any case,
we'll get back
the
there
interesting
again.
thing, yeah, is if I take this out and go back to just pure server side, take that out, go back to pure server side, and then we run this. I think we get in trouble here where it says, yeah, add cascading authentication state says, but I can't get that required service.
Right.
We saw in this code, and I'm going to F12 into add cascading authentication state, that it says, first thing it says is, well, let me go get this required service. And it says, it's not here. It doesn't exist. There isn't one. Which I think we can verify simply by putting a breakpoint here and then run it. And we're going to get to that breakpoint, and I can just put my mouse over the builder.services. Look at that, 155 services. So I'm not going to be able to just scroll through this very quickly, but I imagine that if I did, we would not find an authentication state provider in here. So
I would say that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping there'd be like 8, because then we could just look through it. And we could probably write a little code to figure it out, but let's not get too sidetracked.
No.
So,
but as you're finding out, it's all a bit of investigation. And
yeah.
Right Kicks, thanks for joining us. Yes, we are. We've got our sleuthing hats on here this morning.
Yeah.
So let me also morning to Vero Krieger. Good to have you on board as well. So hopefully we'll have some good conversation here as we dig deeper into authentication.
Yeah, so let's comment this out and go back to what we were doing to get around it. So for now, we are precluded from using the authorized view, which I want to make it clear is that even though I'm trying to kind of live without this stuff, I am not coming to any kind of conclusion that you should.
Okay.
It's more of like, okay, when it's late at night or it's been a long day at work and you don't know why this isn't working. Now we know the dependencies. We know that authorized view, this really key component that we are going to use a lot, requires an authentication state provider. And you say, well, where's that getting added in Program CS? Well, it's a combination of picking an interactive mode and then adding cascading authentication state. Like those two things work together to light this up.
Okay.
So we were getting around it in server side, pure server side mode. We were getting around it by saying, we're just going to dive in ourselves and we're going to say to get me HTTP context. Let's get the user. Let's get the identity. Let's find out if they're authenticated, and we'll show if they are. We'll show if they're not. We were able to add HTTP context as a cascading parameter, and then look, the rest of it goes. There's no interactive magic happening. Nothing else. And I think this now works. So let's see if the app comes up for us. Here it is. Yep. We're not authorized, of course.
Yep.
Because we've done nothing. So that's all. If you are 100% pure server side. Now, I don't know what your observations are on that. I have a couple. One of them is that I don't know how many people come to Blazor for pure server side rendering.
True. I mean, a lot of the story around it is interactivity, so there's that.
Yeah. Previous versions of Blazor especially where that was part of the ball game.
Mm-hmm.
But what always fascinated me about Blazor in ASP.NET Core 8 is the fact that the foundation is server-side rendering. Like that is what you get in the box, and then you layer on top of it. And in fact, thanks to the pre-rendering story, unless you do more work, you're always having some server-side rendering happening for your components. So I found it very important. I find it very important to say, I really want to understand how this works, because like it's the foundational layer, and yet I could just gloss over it by adding interactive server or interactive WebAssembly, and then everything works. And I just never stop and think about what that means. It's kind of interesting, right?
It is. It is.
So let's see what we do next. And what I want to find is, it turns out in the docs, and we'll make sure we share this with everybody. I thought that I had this. Okay, yes. So let's take a look in the docs here. We'll make sure we share this in the show notes. This is ASP.NET Core in .NET 8, and there's a whole. What you do is you're in Blazor, and you scroll down to Security and Identity Overview, and you get a very large article about this, and it talks about how this works, and it says, here is the authentication state provider. The built-in authentication state provider service obtains authentication state from HTTP context.user. That's server side.
Yep.
And this explains how it integrates. And then they talk about what an authentication state provider service looks like. And they're like, you typically don't use this directly. Instead, you use the authorized view component. And we have thoroughly now addressed how you can use that.
Yep.
So then they talk about how you can roll your own. So that's interesting. Let's see if, in fact, this is the article that talks about rolling your own. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can do just that for the purpose of making server-side rendered, completely server-side rendered Blazor functional with some kind of authorization.
Okay. So we're not we're not doing the interactivity, which we know would give us the ability. We're kind of, like you said, rolling our own instance of it.
Right. And I want to make it clear that I really don't know the value of this, because I think even in my most server-side rendered app, I will probably have an island or two of interactivity. I think.
But if you do that, you're not doing and help me wrap my head around this. If you're adding interactivity, you've still got to go back to the program file and say, or the program CS, and say add interactive server, even if I'm only doing it in one little control that may get that helps, right?
Right.
Okay.
It makes me wonder if there's value here. And the reason I say it is what if you wanted to build essentially a kind of a static site generator, maybe not really a static site generator, but instead of the Blazor app instead of your app generating a static site that's just HTML files and whatever, and you just plop it on a service and it's done, you want to go just one step above, where you say, well, it's still a content management system. So there's an app and it's pulling stuff. I don't know where it's pulling it, a database or whatever, what have you. But I don't need interactivity. I'm just splatting documentation out there. So server side's great. And you run to Blazor and you say server, and you say, not, and then you just start getting stuck because you said, hold on, I still need people to be authorized to view this.
Okay. So interesting, because your site doesn't necessarily have quote unquote interactivity in that I'm adding content, modifying content, or what have you, but I do have some kind of authentication authorization I still want to put in place.
Right.
Which is a very, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a use case. It does seem reasonable.
Yeah.
But it also seems like if you think of all the use cases around interactivity, a large portion of them are going to involve the user adding or modifying or editing some kind of form, field, data in that environment, and just the consuming of content is kind of a small use case. Important,
Right.
but small when in the grand scale.
Right. So we had a couple other comments. We have hello from the Philippines. That's awesome.
Hello, Maiku. That's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then again, Rykix, I think, is knows where we're going.
Yeah.
Still possible to use server-side rendering, but not clear on the fact that you have to implement a custom authentication state provider. So we're going to do that. And I want to try to not dwell on it too much because I think there may be some more value in doing some other things. But let's add a class. And I'm just going to put it in a services folder. I am not trying to say that I'm sorting out the best practices in the world, but we're going to say that this is I'm even going to call it the TheDevTalkShow's authentication service provider. And so we're going to get this thing. And the first thing we want to do is we are implementing authentication state provider. So that worked, except that it gets kind of unhappy. And so I'm going to just ask it, well, why don't you just implement the abstract class for me? And it says, okay, sure. And interesting that it returns a task, which is cool because that means it's actually async ready. It's async implementable. And that could be important if your authentication state provider maybe has to go to a database or to another service to get an answer. Then I would do one of these numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would change this from a task to an authentication state. And it's not working because I haven't returned anything, but that's good to go. But it turns out for our example, we're going to be totally CPU bound and just do some stuff here.
Okay.
So I don't need to be async. And in fact, if I add an async keyword, it's going to say like, oh, where's your await? Now, what we're going to do, and quite frankly, if you are following along and you see the implement a custom authentication state provider, totally cutting and pasting this code, but it gives you an idea in a way of what's happening under the hood, where your real authentication state provider is creating a claims principal. It is adding claims to it. It's creating a claims identity, and it's basically saying, okay, let's return that user so that way the rest of the system knows the authentication status of the user.
Yep.
So I'm going to say we're just going to create a new identity here, and we'll say new claim. Oh, look at it's already trying to fill stuff in, which is cool.
So helpful.
Pretty cool. And you know what? Claim type, the name is John Doe. I'll go with that. And then what else do you add in here when you create a claim? When you create a claims identity, first you pass a list of claims, which we're doing using an array. And in fact, it's kind of interesting how it's telling me. I think what it's telling me here is use a collection expression is what it's saying I could do instead, which looks like that. Okay, fine, whatever. And then the second parameter you pass is the authentication type. And I don't care if it says test authentication type. That's totally fine with me. So we've got John Doe. That's cool. And then you need to create a user because the most important thing is, and that's the code I was going to write anyway, is if we want to see what this is this is a claims principal. I need a claims principal that the authentication state provider is going to return. So this method, get authentication state async, is getting called by the framework, and I suppose specifically probably being called to determine which of those authorized view choices to show.
Yes. Yep.
And it's saying like, oh, okay. So because we are not an async method, we get to use task from result, which basically says, hey, I know I need a task, but I don't actually need to create and start and run a task. I don't need to do that. I have the answer.
Yeah.
So let me make a task from this result. And so what happens is you get a completed task. It's done. No exceptions. It works. And I don't want to say tricking. This isn't totally right. You're basically, the rest of the system thinks, well, you must have gone off and done a lot of work. And you're like, oh yeah, I got it covered.
Yes. Took me all this time to write. How many lines of code?
It's great. So we have an authentication state provider, but this has not been registered yet. So
Okay.
unlike this method where unlike the method where we used add interactive server components and we got one of those, let's now say builder. I wonder if it was going to figure it out. I didn't give it much of a chance though. Builder.services. No, not quite. Not add authentication core. That's not what I'm looking for. I am looking for a scoped service though. And that's it. Bingo. Great job. That's awesome. I
Nice.
even love how it says, well, you've implemented one of these, so you probably mean yours.
Right.
And it's like, yep, that's correct. There's a little bit of using magic to do here. So that's in. And then another little bit of using magic to do here. So that's in our own services and the actual abstract class. Now, I believe that this now allows me to come back here and bring back this section. I think. Pretty sure. So
We're going to find out.
yeah, we're about to find out. And I also believe that none of this is going to work unless I add cascading authentication state, because I think this relies on it. But let's do a little bit of red green.
Yeah.
And watch it fail, or maybe,
which is fine.
I mean, maybe it won't fail. But here's the
answer.
We
got to run it. There you go.
Yeah, here's the answer. It did blow up. Cannot provide a value for the property authorization on this component, the authorized view component. There's no registered server. So I think that's what's happened.
I agree.
It's just like, but wait a second, you didn't cascade it down to me, the component that wants to figure this out. Now we'll see if I have egg on my face here, because we've just added that line back in, and look at that. Still did not work entirely. Okay. So there's more to it than that. It's saying I don't have an authorization policy. And it could be because what I'm not 100% sure about, I wasn't 100% sure about, is do I actually have to go to the routes? So if you're not familiar, every Blazor project has this router component. And I mean, this is provided for you in the template.
Mm-hmm.
And, we may have people in the chat like shouting, like, I know the answer, and I'm not even paying attention.
I'm watching it.
Oh, okay, cool. So what I actually do kind of like about Razor is this is app.razor. And what I like about this is it looks like the base web page. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a nice switch from the previous version.
Yeah, I like this. Where in the previous versions, that was buried in www root. And so it just felt a little disconnected to me. Maybe it didn't bother anybody else. So the routes component that is kind of dropped in here, this is responsible for kind of displaying, here are the pages that you can visit. And then it provides all the routing for that too. So you want your routes component, but your routes component is your own. This is your own component. So that's sitting right here in routes.razor. And what I did not do here is I did not say, see, I didn't know that I'd have to do this though. That's the thing. But maybe this will become clear in a second. I want to say authorize route view and the route data. Oh, see, now that's interesting. It got when I think what, oh, well, now it's saying, is this what you wanted? So let's go with that for a second.
Okay.
One of the problems here is we need a using directive.
Sure.
I could go put this in the imports.razor. I could do that. Maybe we'll move it in a little bit.
As long as we find out we need it. Yeah.
Right. And this is complaining because it's not closed. Okay. So we'll close that. Now, the question here is, I don't think I want it to look like this. I think Route view, route data. I want to say that this is going to drop in here. I think it probably has to be an authorized. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I actually don't. I want an anonymous path.
Okay.
We might have to look at another template too. Because I feel like this is going to prevent me from seeing anything. Oh, this is. Oh, interesting. It accepts content through. There is the authorizing state, which we have not covered all that much.
Authorizing,
right? We haven't
Okay.
covered that very much, and it's a state that I've just started to discover, which is what you can show to the user while you're out figuring out whether or not they're authorized.
Hold, please.
Yeah. So no, that didn't work either. It's still not happy. No registered service of authorization policy provider. Let's see. Is that because, let's think about why this is that because I haven't, let's see, there's some things I might not have done yet. For one thing, back in this particular view, I have not injected an authentication state provider. So
Okay.
is that part of the issue? Am I kind of barking up the wrong tree? And the authorized view is saying, hold on, if you just injected it, no, that's not it, because I still got the authorization policy provider issue. So the next place I was going to go when we talked about this is what if we go create a new project and say no interactivity, but we want authentication. How does it set it up? And I wonder if we'll get a clue there.
Interesting. Yeah.
I could flounder around for a little bit, but let's see if that works. Let's see if I can get a clue from saying file new project. And if I go to new project, because this will kind of even recap how we got to where we're at. So Blazor web app, and we're going to say Blazor SSR, but with auth, right? Because previously we didn't. So the last time, the way we got to where we're at is we started with authentication type none and interactive render mode none.
Yeah.
Let's try this and see if we get a clue about how it works out. So interactive render mode is none, but yet we have login support. What does that look like? And so here, this is interesting. It started dropping in a bunch of stuff. It dropped in a server authentication state provider.
Huh.
Okay.
So they just your server-side rendering.
Yeah, they dropped it in for us instead of what I've been doing is I've been going out and saying, well, let's add the Blazor server components. They said, well, you're not getting that. So let's add it in. I am not quite ready to add this stuff in. This stuff will be important. This will be important. And then, of course, they go a little bit further. They go ahead and they add a cookie scheme. And here's the database. And I was just trying to say, like, let's find out how that stuff works later, including this, which is important stuff. Map additional identity endpoints. That's all really important. But that is an interesting piece of news. Now let's go look at how their router component looks. Routes.razor. So, oh, I see. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. We have an authorized route view, which looks like it is this component supplies a cascading parameter, which makes the user's current authentication state available to descendants.
Huh.
So you don't have to add the cascading parameter because it does it for you. Authorize route view. And if you're not authorized, they're going to redirect to login, which is not going to work for us because we don't have any of this code in.
Yep.
The other thing that's interesting is look at that code. That's not a Microsoft component, sort of quote unquote. It's yours. This is in your project. Redirect to login.
Oh wow.
It's code that's been written for you. So where was it again? It's components, account, shared, redirect to login.
Okay.
Quite a bit of stuff gets dropped on you. And part of what the deconstruction has been is to say, like, so what gets dropped on you?
Right.
It's going slower than I kind of wanted it to, but
I think it also surprises a little what it did try and drop in this instance.
Yeah, it added cascading authentication state. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is equivalent to having a cascading authentication state component at the root of your component hierarchy, but yet over in routes.razor, this says that it supplies a cascading parameter. That's interesting. I wonder if there's some redundancy there. I don't know that there is. And now let's go look at the home page that they generate. I'm sorry, wrong spot. Let's close account and go to pages and open the home page. And there's just like nothing there. So that's fine.
Right.
But this page requires authentication and the authorized view just works.
Huh.
You're just happy. So, okay. All right. Let's see if we can add some of that stuff back in. So we are now, for people following along, we are back in our project, which was kind of built from scratch.
Yeah.
And let's see what this takes. We know we have Razor component. We added our own authentication state provider. So I don't necessarily think that we want to change that. Add cascading authentication state in their template is first. I do not know if order is going to matter here, but I don't think, like, it doesn't feel like it should, but.
Well, doesn't the add cascading authentication state need the authentication state provider?
Oh, I don't know, maybe.
I mean, because that was when we started going down that path. Yeah, I thought the cascading state, something in that tries to get your authentication state provider.
You know what? That's a good point. Is when we F12'd into it, get required service, and maybe it was blowing up there. So let's make that the only change.
Okay.
I was going to add this line too, but let's make that the only change and see just where it moves us to. And we still have this issue about can't provide a valid prop value for property authorization policy provider. So I'm kind of interested here is like, okay, where is this authorization policy provider coming from now? But let's see now. In routes.razor, I'm going to compare it to what they did. And they do. So we have an authorized route view.
Yeah.
And we have a not authorized. And then, oh, you know what might have been interesting is maybe I don't want to have a second route view, although I don't think that's the issue. But now we kind of look a lot like what theirs does.
Sure.
Found context. We have an authorized route view. For not authorized, we're not going to redirect. We're just going to say you can't come here and focus on navigate. So I still think we're missing something though. Okay. Still same spot.
Yeah.
But where we still differ is here in home.razor. And the way we differ is, oh, sorry, not home.razor, auth.razor. The way we differ is I really don't want an authorize attribute.
Right.
Because I'm trying to allow this page to be viewable by both. So I really don't want that.
Yeah, because that, I mean, it doesn't matter that you've got that authorized view wrapped in that control because everything on that page is authorized view.
Yeah, at least that should be correct. That should be correct. So here's where I think it could be. I think this could be what we're missing. Add authorization.
Okay.
Let's F12 into it and see if we can figure it out. Interesting that. Is it going to let me go to an implementation? That would be really cool. No, I'm having trouble getting to an implementation. Let's go back and try straight from here. Go to implementation. Okay, cool. Now, we added some services, including authorization policy cache. We added authorization core, which I'm going to try to control F12 into. Let's go see what's in there. It didn't. It's not doing it. Oh, it didn't do what I wanted. Okay, add authorization core, and look at this one.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Called auth policy provider.
So I think we might know where some of that magic's coming from.
Okay.
And it does explain why, at least to me, it explains why when I created a brand new project, even though we got all this other gunk, this was a line of code that we hadn't been used to seeing.
Yeah.
We did not need it if we said add interactive server components. And I just feel like that add interactive server components is doing extra stuff. It must be setting this up. It's setting up an authentication state provider. It's doing a little bit more than one would expect.
Right.
So now, after saying all that, build succeeded. That's cool. It builds, and look at this. So,
authorized, you are not authorized.
Let's go take. I'd like to believe that is. I'd like to believe that that's just a mistake on the page, but we could have learned a lot by building a non-interactive app with authentication.
Right.
But I'm almost kind of glad that we didn't, because what happens is you get this, and while this is cool, you're getting the database, you're getting cookies, you're getting stuff that's like, I'm just not ready for that yet. I just kind of want to see how this works. So why is it saying that? I think we're authorized. But not authenticated, because this app does not require authentication. I'm sorry, okay. This page does not require authentication. So I think that's what's happening here. And we can, there's ways to work on this, to build this, to say like, hey, you can only get in here if you meet a certain policy. We haven't done any of that. We haven't defined any policies. We haven't done anything like that.
Yep.
What's interesting to me, though, is we are still not getting this part, which I was hoping that it would say you're logged in as a certain user. And we're not seeing that.
Which would, to your point, because since we're not authenticated, we never get into that block at 23. So
that's true. But I had hoped that our custom authentication service provider would say, yes, here's your user. Here they are. So,
I mean,
it might not do that. Let's I want to set a breakpoint. Why can't I set a breakpoint here? Oh, I can set one there. Oh, and it doesn't even trip.
No, because it never gets to true.
Yeah, you're right.
That's where you need it.
You're right. So if context, there is a context. But I guess
running an because we're running on the server.
The user's not authenticated. Interesting. User authenticated equals false. Even though, let's see if there's an identity in here, though. That John Doe identity. No, it's null. It's null.
It's got claims.
Okay.
If you go back to it. that.
No claims at all, right?
Interesting. Okay.
There is an identity. So it's almost like it didn't pick up that identity.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I needed this.
Is that so it persists, the identity?
Oh, why did I have that injected?
Yeah.
It was a kind of an on a lark thing.
Okay.
So let's try a couple other things. We have a custom authentication state provider. Okay, fine. And then I wonder if we have to also implement, let's go to our custom authentication state provider. Do we have to also implement, and this is straight from the docs, so just cutting and pasting here, and then we'll deal with the consequences. Do we have to implement this where we say authenticate user? Because it really looks, oh, okay, so the code's changes a little bit. So we have this authenticate user method that looks a lot like the one from earlier.
Yeah.
Except that what happens is this code changes, and this is just coming out of the docs. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste it in. So instead, they say when you call get authentication state async, let's create a new identity, let's create a new claims principal. And when somebody calls authenticate user with a user identifier, we're just going to create an identity, notify that the authentication state has changed. The interesting thing to me is, how do I get someone to sign in? Maybe this is the whole, I wonder if this is leading me down a way where, yes, you're teaching me something, but it's not really where I want to go. I don't know for sure. So this authenticate user method could now be called to basically create a user and then notify that state has changed, notify that the authentication state has changed.
Yeah.
And pass it along. Go ahead.
That code in there,
Uh-huh.
at some point would get replaced.
Yes,
to point
right.
to whatever your actual implementation is.
The real sign-in code. Yeah, this is sort of the, I don't really want anyone to have to sign in version.
Yep.
So what if it makes sense for me to override on initialized, and then in here say what is that thing called? It's called authenticate user, but it's not going to be that easy.
No.
It's called authenticate user. I don't know, is it going to be able to help us? No, it's like, I got no idea what you're talking about. And let's say that the username is me, and I don't need anything else, but we're going to have to call this thing, and we want the TDTS authentication state provider. Is that what that was called?
Yes.
Yep. TDTS authentication state provider, which it's now complaining, saying, hold on, you don't even have a using for that. So now we do. Yeah, I don't know if this is really what I want, but
does it say what it's complaining about? Seems happier.
It does. But what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, can you go grab an authentication state provider? But see, now it's complaining because it's saying, hold on, this is a type. Yeah. So that goes back to this whole thing where let's go inject it again. And again, probably not the way you want to use this long term. and now I've never been a big fan of injecting this stuff with the same exact name. I know a lot of things do that, but then I feel like it's not easy for me to tell, am I providing a class or am I providing an instance?
Yeah.
And I'm providing an instance, so let's do that. And so on initialize, I don't know if this is going to work. This is saying, let's go authenticate a user with this name. Let's do that.
Okay. So one of our "you're not authorized" things should go away if this works.
Yeah. As you can see, it did not.
Oh.
So it's possible. There's some other things that might be going on here too.
Well, do we still have that breakpoint on the authenticate user?
Right here.
I guess that's the one.
So we have the context. The context says a user. The user is not authenticated. So the other possibility here.
We got about last 5 minutes.
Yeah, last 5 minutes. We might be getting far enough away that maybe we've discovered enough. I don't necessarily want to give up, but
no.
But I think, like, have we discovered enough that we could move forward? I don't know yet. Because I think where I'd like to land is I'd like for there to be a login component. I would like to not necessarily have to use the database, although I've gone back and forth on that, because even when you use external auth, it's like I'm probably going to want to store some data about it. Yeah. So I'm not trying to say that that's totally a waste of time. But let's see here now. Can I do this? When I say can I do this, you're like on the edge of your seat. What does that even mean? In on initialized, HTTP context has this helper method. At least I thought it had this helper method. Maybe it's an extension method. See what happens when I right click on it. Yep. So ASP.NET Core is offering an extension method on HTTP context called sign in async.
Huh.
Okay. Now let's go back to our authentication state provider. We created a claims identity and we supplied the claims and we called the scheme custom authentication. We need that. We need that scheme name. So the first thing it takes, well, one of the extension methods takes, let's try to find the one that I want, is it takes a scheme. All right. And then we need a claims principal, but claims principal, see, this is where I think it's weird. That claims principal, I wanted to get out of the authentication state provider. That was my take, was
sure
that's where I should get it. So something's not right here. But I suppose this doesn't feel like it's a good long-term answer. If I create all that right here, and then user identifier is going to be my name, and then whoops, I double quoted there. So this isn't even going to be important. And what else does sign in take? You got to provide the principal, which is user.
Which is user. Yep.
And then I want to provide, do I have to provide anything else, or am I good?
I don't think so. I think it was just those two. It's the semicolons complaining about.
Yeah. Okay. There's another thing you can provide, which is properties on the authentication, which will be useful later if we want things to be like if you want to have like a check me, a remember me type box. We have to await this. So it's async. I needed the uninitialized async one. What is that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. From memory. One last try. Although it still looks funny. Oh, it's possibly a null reference. Okay, sure. It might be. And No, it's not. It wasn't happy.
A service collection add authentication.
That's weird though, because I thought we did that.
Yeah, but did we? Interesting. Yeah.
Oh no, add authorization is here. Oh, has
Is there
that
a
been my
separate-
problem the whole time? Has that been my problem the whole time that I said add authentication? Oh, wow. That would be, in fact, let me go back to, oh no. Okay.
What?
It might be that you really need both. See this add authentication part?
Yeah.
We didn't really deal with that all that well. So let's try this, and then we'll, if it doesn't work, then we know what we're up to. Because maybe the authentication state provider is like, I'm trying. You just didn't give me everything. No, it still did not work.
Oh.
But it's close though. No sign-in authentication handlers are registered. Did you forget to call add cookie? It's basically, I love it. I love when it's like, hey, you know,
nudge, nudge. Here you go.
Did you forget to do something? And sure. I keep saying that that's the last one, right?
That's okay. I mean, is it okay?
And you can just say add cookie, or you can add the scheme, and our scheme is called custom authentication, I think.
Okay.
That's a whole interesting world about this auth schemes and how they all hang on strings. Yep, custom authentication. And look at that. Now they're both saying not authorized. So we didn't go the direction we wanted, but we're certainly kind of back in business. So it could be that we need to sign in. Now that I've quote unquote though run that sign in, I wonder. Let me run this again. Look at that. So on initialized async did the work, but the page was already rendered.
Because we didn't have interactivity.
Yeah. The page was already rendered. And so when all I did was hit refresh, and the app is like, yeah, you're logged in. I've got a user.
Yeah.
And now that's obviously not an experience that we want, but that's interesting that
but
it makes me wonder. Yeah.
But let's be honest, right? If I authenticate, I'm going to go to a page where I log in and authenticate myself, and then I'm going to go back to this page with context that says, hey, you need to be authorized. You're authorized, yes, right? So
right.
I know you want to get to the point of having that control in the corner that does that, but if we think about typically server-side how it happens, there's a separate login page, and then you come back.
Yep. So I think those last few minutes might have gotten a little confusing. And we
did a lot in those last few minutes.
Yeah, we certainly tried to push pretty hard at the end there. Trying to find my my little control booth for the stream. So
I can definitely do that for you.
Yeah, I got it. So we definitely kind of pushed there at the end, but so unlike the last episode, anybody watching, I'm not 100% confident that we've totally kind of backpedaled into something that you want to put in on your own. But I wonder if we're closer to being able to say, okay, here's the file new project. Can we take things out so that I'm not managing my own usernames and passwords? That's not even an option on my site.
Right.
You come in, you show up, it's external auth. And you might ask, why do I want that? Because I think there's a lot of developers who might be building an app for internal use, and they just want it to work. They just want to say, like, you're already logged into your computer at work. Like, shouldn't it just work?
It's a scary proposition.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know. That's not something that you've seen
I think that's classic security. It's the castle moat thing, right? We've got our castle, and there's a moat protecting it. And once you're in the castle, it's all good. But if somebody gets into the castle, everything's open to them in that kind of a scenario. So it's really not. It becomes almost and now I'm blanking on the term we use, but essentially it's everything is still locked down even if you're in the environment.
Yeah. No, I certainly know what you're talking about where, okay, so there's a lot of services that are used at places I work that they tie into your corporate SSO.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you're logged into your laptop, it still makes you click. And then the click might, or it might not, go authenticate you again. But
Right.
I guess what I'm driving at is that if you use the default Blazor templates, you're getting a create a new username password experience that I'm trying to get rid of, because I think there are a lot of folks who are saying, I've been tasked to build a project for work and I want that single sign-in to work.
Yeah.
So maybe you're right that it's not just an automatic experience, but at least there isn't any option that says create a new account, give me a new, because none of that stuff is useful in that particular scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, that I agree with. Yep.
So hopefully we learned a lot today.
I did. I think we saw some good stuff there. I think it was fun.
Yeah. I got a little jumbled at the end, and I'm still a little unclear as to whether we even need to implement our own authentication state provider anymore, because the template provides that server authentication state provider.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we don't have to do that. I'm sure there are great use cases for it, but I wonder if that was a little bit of overreaching, where it's like, oh, we can just use the one that they put in for you when you use Blazor server, but still trying to stay completely server side for at least as long as possible.
Yep.
I don't know how useful that is, only because even the apps that I've thought of, there's some interactivity that I like here and there. And you could certainly bypass a lot of this by just saying, like, okay, let's just start working on the component, because we've done that before. We've built a logging component.
Yeah.
It wasn't complete, but it did certainly sign in and sign out.
Yes, which is what we needed. So
yeah. All right.
Cool. Awesome stuff. Thank you, Chris.
9.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody who joined us online, and don't forget you can watch all the replays. We're at youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. Any comments that you have, anything you discover, if you like this content, hit the like button. And we're continuing to explore. You did a lot of work again back with the OpenAI and DALL-E project, which is really cool. And I think eventually you wanted to see if we could drop authentication into it. So
yeah,
authentication and authorization. So cool. All right. Awesome.
Sounds fun. Want to take us out?
Yeah. Everybody, it's Friday. Have a great week. It is Friday, right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Have a great weekend. Baseball's starting up. I just happened to notice there's some games. I don't know if it's, I think it's opening day, or maybe, there was some games in South Korea, but I don't know. Maybe today might be the our side of the pond's opening day, if you're an American or in North America. So other than that, like Vero Krieger says, it's Friday night game night. That's a video game night, right? Which is awesome. That could be true for a lot of people too. No matter what you're doing, have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.